How's it going, ParaTruthers? Welcome to another episode of ParaTruth Reborn. This is a pre-recorded show on 107.7 FM New Orleans, 105.3 FM on the Gulf Coast, and United Public Radio Network. My name is Justin, and today we are going to be revisiting another ParaTruth Radio archive entitled, Look, God is Here, where we talked to Dr. Marni Foderaro about her spiritual transformative encounters. And we hope you enjoy.
Today we have joining us Dr. Marni Hill Foderaro. She is an award-winning and celebrated author, speaker, and educator. She earned her doctorate in education from Northern Illinois University and completed a postdoctoral studies at Harvard during a very successful and rewarding 35-year career at a high school as a high school special education teacher, with 12 years as a university adjunct graduate school professor. Now, Marni's life was forever changed after experiencing numerous trauma-induced STEs, or what she calls spiritually transformative encounters. So without further ado, we're going to go to the line to talk to her just about that. Dr. Marni, thank you for joining us on ParaTruth Radio. We're so happy to have you with us.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's great to talk about these things.
It really is. We have so much fun talking to people who just have these experiences, and it's really rewarding for us, and it's just very it's educational. Not just for us, but for all of our listeners who are really interested in this type of stuff. Now, we're just going to jump right into it because you had experienced numerous trauma-inducing STEs, which you call spiritually transformative encounters. Now, we've talked to people in the past who've had similar encounters, but why don't you just give us a little detail of how it all kind of began?
Yeah, sure. I was in a transition in my life, and I was definitely in a state of meditation and thankfulness and gratitude, really kind of just going deep into my soul. This out of the blue, at this garage sale I had, there were some experiences that were just otherworldly, and it turned out there were so many situations that I could not ignore it. I had to pay attention to what was going on. And even at the time, I wasn't analyzing it too much. I did a lot more research on this and trying to understand what I saw, what I felt, what I heard. So I did a lot of research afterwards that really validated that, I really did see what I saw and heard what I heard. And that other people have had these kind of transformative experiences, and STEs. It's a term that's coined by Dr. Yvonne Kaysen. She has an organization called Spiritual Awakenings International, which is really an offshoot of the IANS, which is the International Association for Near-Death Studies. So people that have actually flatlined and had these otherworldly experiences and come back to tell about it. I just didn't have to flatline. But it definitely was trauma induced because it was a real transition in my life. But it was so very clear. In fact, what I experienced was more clear than just what I experience on Earth every day.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you obviously wrote a book called God Came to My Garage Sale. In the description, you say it's fiction vignette of collection of spiritual miracles inspired by true events. So were you the atheist woman that you're talking about here? And
yes,
then you started having these experiences and it completely changed your mind, or did it just make you question things a little bit more?
It's not immediately, but through the years afterwards, when I analyzed everything that I had experienced and did a lot of research into other people that have had these kind of experiences. Yes, I did switch from the questioning that there was something more to this earth than what I previously thought. Yes, I grew up atheist. As I was older, I did question. I wanted to understand, why the world is the way it is. Like, why do we experience what we do? And to me, it seemed like there had to be something more than what I was taught as a child, that you just live and die and there's no divine intervention of any kind. But, so yes, I am the atheist woman. Even though it's not autobiographical and it is a fiction, it really is inspired by, my book was inspired by true experiences. So I took the experiences I had and I wrote it really in many ways, just kind of what I experienced. It's almost like words can't even describe fully what you have seen, what you have gone through. And so I did make it a fiction. But even though it is based on a lot of true encounters, and actually they all didn't happen at a weekend garage sale, even though in the book they do. That's part of the fiction part where I could kind of tie it all into, one event. I realized that prior to the garage sale, I had some experiences. I looked back earlier in my life and could, some things made more sense to me now. And then I certainly have had a number of experiences afterwards, because now I'm more in tune to it. I'm paying attention to the signs and synchronicities that I see.
Okay. So I was actually the opposite. I was brought up in organized religion. I ended up becoming atheist or agnostic at one point in my life because I was going through a lot of different things and started really questioning, if there is a God, like how can we be suffering the way that we are? Right. And then it actually ended up coming back to religion, but I don't believe in organized religion anymore. Me
either. So I do not attend church. I did, though, at one point, and I did see the value in that, and it introduced me to the Bible, and I got to learn about it. I love the community aspect of it, but I am not a fan of organized religion with all the hypocrisy and all the divide, and right. And that doesn't seem to be what God is all about. And so I consider myself as well very spiritual, a believer, but not needing to partake in man's organized religion.
Okay. Right, exactly. And that, I think we're all in the same boat there, because I became a born again Christian in 2009, and I spent years at the church. Had made plenty of good friends there, and just kind of eventually drifted away after I moved to Virginia, and kind of drifted away after experiencing some downsides to the church. Yes. And then I started thinking about it. It's like, why, at least in the Christian church, why are there so many denominations? And why is it split like that? There should be one. And I started, thinking, and I've read cover to cover of the Holy Bible, and I started realizing there's really just, 3 or 4 base truths, at the foundation that every single one of those denominations, for the most part, believe. And I started telling people when they ask, it's like, oh, I'm just a spiritual Christian, or at least I'm spiritually aware with the Christian foundation. Right. And they don't quite understand what that means. And it's hard to explain because people in organized religion, they tend to be hard-headed sometimes. They were taught a certain way, and they're kind of stuck in their ways, which is totally fine. As long as they believe those basic truths. But what I want to ask, since you were atheist, I'd imagine maybe you didn't. I don't know. Did you have a lot of base a lot of your facts on science? And if so, like, how was that transition then when you're thinking about, oh, there is something more out there? Like, how was that battle within?
I am someone that needs proof, and I'm a lifelong learner as an educator, and, gone on to, I'm always seeking out learning experiences. But I would say some of the people that wrote books and went on to talk about their spiritual experiences, many of the ones that were very convincing for me did have a scientific background to them. For example, Dr. Eben Alexander, and he's the famous Harvard neurosurgeon that, died from meningitis, but had a near-death experience, came back to explain scientifically that there is absolutely no way that he could have experienced what he did in the state that his body was in, that it had to be attributed to a consciousness. And he does a lot of research on how consciousness survives physical death. And so he was one of many that I really looked into, that could give me more proof, that could give me some evidence to make it make more sense. This happens to be another medical doctor, Dr. Marni Hill, who was an atheist before her near-death experience. She was in a kayaking accident. She was underwater for over 30 minutes. Her body was just, gone in many ways, blue, whatever. And what she experienced, and the fact that she could come back from that and completely change her viewpoint on that there's more to this earth, that when we physically die, we don't physically die, that there is a consciousness. And, it looks different for different people, yet there are so many similarities. So to answer your question, I think, I needed to search this out, and not just, I needed to validate what I went through too. And it took a while, and I hear that this is pretty common as well, that, it's not like immediately after that you want to start investigating this. It's almost like you have these experiences and you take it in, and it's almost like your mind, your heart, your soul, your body needs to kind of make sense of it before you can try to find the words to describe what you've gone through.
Mm-hmm.
So when you started having these STE experiences, obviously it wasn't an out-of-body experience. That's similar to what you're talking about, but not exactly. What exactly happened, I guess? Like, was it, and you don't have to talk about the trauma, but what happened with the STEs?
Yeah. There were a lot of things, like one main, the first experience that I had that really got me thinking that there was something more. Well, I was looking back at my home at this garage sale, and a dragonfly circled me, and I thought that was pretty neat. And then there were 5, and I thought that's really unusual. But within minutes, there were 50 to almost 100 dragonflies circling me.
Wow.
Now, normally, as my earthly person, I would totally freak out at that because I'm not into bugs or insects of any kind. And to be surrounded by them, that would not be comfortable for me. But I was just in a state of awe. I wasn't scared. I wasn't questioning it. I was just kind of accepting this experience. Everything was in slow motion. And I will tell you that all my encounters really happen in slow motion. So that's like a common thread for me, that I know that I'm experiencing something unique because it's just like the air is clear jello or something like that. But I could see these dragonflies fly down the block. I could see them come back. It was so slow and so close and so clear that I could see the veins in the wings. I could see the iridescent colors. I could see different sizes that I immediately equated with souls, with people. So they were, babies and toddlers and teenagers and grandparents. And that's the feeling that I got too, was that, I was having this garage sale. I lost everything. It was very traumatic, but I was surrounded with this feeling of love and reassurance that I would be okay. So that was one experience. And I went on to have a couple other dragonfly experiences over the years. Another experience was where I experienced something. I heard information that I know was specific to me through electronics. So through a television set. And then I went on to read about that. Yes, sometimes people are contacted through electronics, and I wouldn't even believe any of this if I didn't experience it myself. I mean, honestly, that's how questioning I am. I'd be like, yeah, right. That, that really could never happen. But after I experienced it, I look at it very differently. I listen to other people's accounts and how they tell what experiences they had. I listen with a different ear, because I really get it now. But so I had an experience through a television set, kind of like an infomercial, that to me felt like I was sitting there for hours watching, when really I was confirmed it was only minutes. But time, there was just like no time. And I saw things specifically for me, and some things that I needed to verify later, which I did. So that was pretty interesting, and I've had some experiences with lights flickering on and off, and you think, okay, well, you could justify that, or you could kind of make an excuse for that, but if it happens for extended periods of time and you can actually command it at a certain time, I was able to do that. Because, and it took a long time for me to finally realize, no, there's something more with the lights going on and off. It's not just, a short in the fuse or anything like that. So it took me a long time. I mean, but when it finally dawned on me, I was challenging it. Like, I want proof. I will count to 3, and I'm not going to tell you when I'm counting to 3. And I want something to happen, and for me to believe this. And I did that over and over, and that was verified. So that was one experience. I had another experience with a license plate, and I know, people have license plates, and you can, kind of put 2 and 2 together and make up your own scenario. But that, again, it was too unique of a situation. It was more than coincidental. It was very synchronistic. And again, the experience was all in slow motion. So with this particular license plate that had a particular word that I, had just been kind of praying to this saint with this name, that experience also was in slow motion. If it wasn't, I would have been in the biggest car accident ever. But, because there's no way that car could have stopped and I could have stopped, but it was just all slow motion for me to see this license plate, to get a confirmation. So those are just some of the many experiences.
And it's interesting because, it does seem like they can all be random or coincidental from someone on the outside, but when you're experiencing it yourself, it's completely different feeling. And I know Justin and I have both had similar feelings throughout the years. One thing that I think is really interesting is how you, much like we do when we do paranormal investigations, is you took the time to investigate what was happening with those lights to find that confirmation.
Oh yeah,
there's scientific evidence for your own purpose. It's not something you're looking. I can't imagine that you, and maybe I'm wrong, but you didn't like record it on video or something like that. It was just for your own.
I will tell you though, with the dragonflies, about 3/4 of the way through, when I started to come out of this kind of trance, I did pull out my cell phone and I recorded that.
Okay.
So I recorded 100 dragonflies flying around me.
Wow.
One thing that's really interesting about the dragonfly thing, was that the first experience that you had?
That's the first experience that I acknowledged that was very significant. Yeah. I don't think it was the first experience I had.
Okay.
But it was a pretty big one that was so clear in my mind, and that I got to videotape it for proof.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you happen to know what the dragonfly represents in spirituality? I mean, that's what I find is so interesting about this, because if that's the one that you acknowledge, and the dragonfly does represent that change or transformation or self-realization, even the understanding of a deeper meaning of life. And it's a common belief throughout so many cultures around the world. So that's really significant, in my opinion. I think that's
right.
just
And I
amazing.
did do a lot of investigating with the dragonfly, and I did kind of an information dump in the first chapter of my book, God Came to My Garage Sale. And yes, it does. The dragonfly in many cultures does mean transformation. And I was going through the biggest transformation of my entire life, was happening at that time. Also, just on a more negative note with dragonflies, dragonflies also have been used to signify being silenced. So like if you saw that movie Silence of the Lambs, the visual image of that movie is of a face with a dragonfly over the mouth.
Right.
And so dragonflies at some point signified people or even children just silencing them, and that they need to keep the secret and stuff like that. And I was leaving a relationship after 27 years where I found out so many secrets that were kept. My values are of honesty and compassion and love and goodness, and that wasn't the case with this relationship that I chose to leave after almost 3 decades. And so I also wonder if there wasn't some of that, like silence, like, because I know that this person that I left would prefer that I would just be silent, that I would not speak the truth. And so I'm wondering if that was part of it. But I went on, actually, that same year, I was spending a holiday, Thanksgiving, for the first time without family. And I was living in the Chicago suburbs at the time. And I wanted to go snow skiing, and there were no runs out west really open at that time. And so I just did a road trip to Minnesota, and, just was having a whole new experience for a holiday. And I came across the Dancing Dragonfly Winery. And then I looked up, and talked to the people there of how did they come up with this name? What is this all about? And that person had pretty much the same experience I had, with slow motion in a transition time. Things could have been traumatic and negative, but they weren't. And the dragonflies came as kind of a support.
Wow. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So the one thing that you were talking about, it was your values. And I think what you described is what a lot of people believe God's values or his intentions are for humanity. So maybe that was his way of saying, now it's time for you to live with my values, my
right.
So that
makes
was really
a lot
interesting.
of sense, because I really am, living true to my values, even though I have lost so much that, I wouldn't wish on anyone. The losses, it's just unfathomable. But at the same time, I'm filled with love, and I'm filled with gratitude and happiness. And I'm in a much better situation in so many ways now than I was living that life where I was staying true to my values, but I wasn't surrounding myself with people who resonated with those same values. So now I'm more discerning about who I let in my life, who I keep in my life, because of my values, and honesty and love being, the biggest values.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's scripturally speaking, it's God sometimes allows us to hit rock bottom so that we have nothing left but to look toward him for guidance. And it almost seems like that's kind of what happened here for you. I think of And I don't, it's different, I'm sure, but I think of like the story of Job, for example, where everything was stripped from him, and in the end, he still chose God, and then everything was gifted back to him in a multitude more
Right.
ways.
Yeah.
And that looks different for everybody. Sometimes it's material, sometimes it's spiritual, sometimes it's emotional. But it seems like, you're going through something good and continuing that journey. So
Yeah,
that's
most
wonderful.
definitely. I am living such a beautiful life, and I'm filled with so much happiness and so much peace. And I've been able to kind of compartmentalize the losses and realize that some are just material and that's not significant. And some of the other losses that involve relationships, you know, um, I've come to understand that I need to stay true to my values. And if someone is dishonest, if someone betrays you, someone, does bad things, it's just not, I don't want anything to do with that. So as hard as it was to step away from some situations and people, in the big picture, it's really for the best.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So here's a question for you, and it's something that I don't necessarily believe, but I can hear skeptics already saying, how can you differentiate, or how is it not just coincidence, these things that are happening to you? How can you differentiate between coincidence and messages or communication from the other side or higher power or stuff like that? Like, what is your explanation for that?
That is a wonderful question. And that is what I have been asking since I started having experiences. Like, really, did this happen? Did I manifest it? Am I reading more into this than I should? I would say really analyzing the situations and just getting the proof that I need. For example, okay, so like hearing songs on the radio that are significant. Okay, but I was listening to, like, one time I was in the car and I was thinking of my late mother, and I was listening to a radio program that did not have music as part of the radio program. And the minute I thought about my mom, her favorite song came on. Like, I know her music. And I thought, well, this is really weird because this is like a news show, that doesn't have music. So I didn't think too much of it at first. But then afterwards, after that song was there, it was almost like the radio show was still going on with just the talk. And so then it's another time where I'm kind of trying to manifest, or I'm testing the situation. And I said, well, that was really weird. Wouldn't it be weird if this particular song came on? And sure enough, that song came on. That song, like not just one of the songs she likes, that one that I said I was kind of like testing the situation. I stayed in my car in a parking lot for about a half an hour doing this with a number of songs. And finally I needed to go to an appointment, but that's another example of, it was just, it wasn't coincidental. And then I went on another day to listen to that same radio station just to see if they would play music at all. And they didn't. And I listened to it again. And then I actually went so far as to call up the radio station to, say, do you ever play music? And they say, no, it's just talk. It's just talk radio. Okay. So I needed more proof, but it just seemed it wasn't coincidental. So that's an example. Another example of this, where I don't think it's coincidental, I would find pennies. And, you hear pennies from heaven. You hear that, find a penny on the ground, it's lucky. And but I would find pennies with one of my children's birth year all the time. I would look at that penny very closely. Sometimes I'd have to use a magnifying because my eyes, I'm getting older. But it seemed that for the longest time, anytime I found a penny, it was that year. It wasn't just finding a penny and having it be kind of just as I was thinking of this child, but it would be, I would pick it up and I would really look at it to investigate it because they all had the same date. And these are pennies picked up from various states, you know, all over different times.
Wow.
Same year all the time. So that's, you know, that just, it was just, I can't just say that's coincidental after a while, especially because I'm consciously thinking about it, and for a long period of time, you know, there was never any other dates on these pennies that I would find.
Right.
And one time I even found 3 pennies together and they were all the same date like that. You know, I don't know. It's just, it just is very synchronistic.
Right.
And it just really, you know, I mean, I'd like to say that, I mean, I feel like I'm someone who believes 100%, but boy, I can always use another confirmation. You know what I mean? Like, you know, yeah, if you want to prove it to me again, I'll take it.
Right.
Because, you know, it's very hard for our earthly minds to wrap around that things like this can happen.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's human nature. It's meant, you know, we're more or less designed by the world to doubt everything that happens, you know, without physical like proof, without something in our face saying, hey, look, I'm right here. You know, I do that all the time. Like I think back to my early life as a Christian, a quote unquote baby Christian. And, you know, I think of all the signs that I saw, you know, through prayer, things that were answered, just little symbols and signs. Even to this day, like I'll walk, just walking down the street and just, you know, doing whatever. I'll look down and there'll be like 2 sticks that are perfectly matched together to form a cross. And it's like these little reminders, like, oh, don't forget I'm here, you know, type of thing. And, you know, there, like I said, there's prayers that I prayed that came true. And it's like, nowadays, I'm thinking back on those, you know, back in 2010, 11, 12, like, did that really happen? And the fact is it did, but it's just so hard to fathom. And, you know, you think, oh, was it just my mind? Was it all in my head? You know, and that's the constant battle I think that we're always going to be in, which is, I think, all the more reason to keep, I think, pressing and trying to find answers is the important thing, because that's what keeps us going forward and searching out.
I agree. And then in the beginning, you know, when we began our conversation, you know, you talked about how, you know, are there coincidences? You know, are we just putting this together in our own mind? Are we just, you know, really seeing what we are seeing? And I just have to believe that we are. Like you also said something about how, you know, why do all these bad things happen to people? Like, how could there be so much earthly suffering and pain? Yet we, you know, as humans, have that spirit to keep going, to keep positive, to try to look on the bright side, to try to make things better. And, you know, because really, because of so much negativity and loss and corruption and fraud and death and disasters, all these terrible things, there has to be some sort of explanation that we as humans can handle what we are able to handle. I mean, some of the losses that I feel I have had, and I know there are many others that have had significant losses, you know, how do you put one foot in front of the other and keep going when the losses are so significant? But somehow there's some sort of spirit within us And I believe that I've been given signs by God to say I'm on the right path, that actually what I experienced was necessary. I needed to go to that rock bottom, dark place to really appreciate the light, the positivity, it's amazing. It's an amazing journey. But I will be someone who will be a lifelong learner on this. I just like so many people too, I felt compelled to write a book about it. You see so many books out there by people who have had experiences because they are compelled to share that, we are all love, we are all light, and to pay attention to these signs and synchronicities. And so through that, I found my author's voice. And that really came in handy, even though I was a teacher for many years. And, I've done a lot of writing and reading and that. But, I ended up moving from the Chicago suburbs to the Caribbean about 3.5 years ago, immersed in nature, just really in a healing journey, just connecting with Source, with God. And I wrote, in a very short period of time, I wrote a 5-book series called True Deceit, False Love. And that addresses a lot of what I experienced with the family traumas and the parental alienation and that type of thing. While I was doing my research to try to understand all of that, it was like I was being given a gift to write these books in a way that would be healing and helpful to many other people that would find themselves in situations like this. So without these experiences, I don't think I would have, evolved into the author that I am now, where I found writing, not only was I able to write about the spiritual experiences, but I was able to through my own loss and surviving abusive situations or whatever, I was able to use what I kind of went through to heal and kind of move towards more self-actualization, I would say.
Okay. So it's amazing to hear your story, because it is very similar to mine. I had a ex who was always telling me I'm so negative. I need to change my thinking on things. And I have felt for a long time alienated from my family. Maybe some of that is my own personal, some of it is theirs. Except for my co-host Eric, who is a cousin, and he's also my best friend, a brother. But after I had broke up with this person, or she broke up with me, whatever it was, I met my wife, and I've started seeing more and more that the phrase that I always use is, it is what it is. And I'm horrible because I watch TikTok and I'm addicted to TikTok, but several videos I've seen recently is, the most dangerous person you can come across is somebody that uses the phrase, it is what it is, because they're accepting everything as it is, and they're not going to let it affect their life. So for somebody who is down and out, letting everything get them down, what's the best advice you can give them with the STEs you've been having, and it being caused by the traumatic experiences you were having? What advice could you give people?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that don't be so hard on yourself, especially with one person saying that anyone who says it is what it is, fits into this kind of category. And actually, you did make a change. whether it was made for you or you did it, you are no longer in that situation. So no, you have grown since then and are able to go back and reflect on some of these things. And unfortunately, sometimes loving, empathetic people surround ourselves with people that are controlling, manipulative. They have bad intentions. They look at us like, wow, I hit the jackpot. This person will put up with anything, and I'll, suck them, suck the life out of them. I'll take their money. I'll take their children. I'll take their self-esteem. They do a lot of gaslighting to make you believe you're not as able or confident or capable as you really are. And so people can do a number on you, and families in some ways are the worst, whether it is a malevolent spouse or whether it is, parents or extended family or siblings that, you feel like you're supposed to be in these relationships with them because that's what society says. But really, it might be the healthiest thing to move away from them. But as far as advice, what I would give to someone is follow your gut feeling. Pay attention to some signs that you would get that something just isn't right. If you're starting to question yourself or feel bad or you're walking on eggshells with people, your gut feeling is telling you something is just not right here. Pay attention to that. Pay attention, maybe even do some research. I'm a big one into researching and learning. Look into red flags and what are some red flags in relationships that, and isolation is one of them, so you've been gaslit, or people in this situation have been gaslit, which means they're smeared to other people. You kind of lose your support system of friends, family, and neighbors, even coworkers, because the malevolent people do whatever they can to put you down, directly or indirectly, to build themselves up. That's the only way they can validate, the shell of who they really are. And we're drawn to these people early on because they love bomb us. You have the same interests, you resonate on so many different levels. They like whatever you like. If you are someone who is spiritual, they are spiritual too, whether they are or not. If you are someone who likes Japanese food and they really hate Japanese food, they'll tell you they like Japanese food because at least in the beginning, they're trying to hook you in, and you get trauma bonded. And so terminology to me is a big thing, following your gut feeling, but also just terminology. Actually, the first book in my 5-book series, True Deceit, False Love, is 15,555 terms and phrases on narcissistic abuse, domestic violence, parental alienation. And then you have to do the inner reflection work to see your role, what was your foundation and things. And so there's intergenerational family trauma. But I didn't set out to write a 5-book series. I was just researching to understand what I was going through and trying to understand, why do bad things happen to good people? And how could I stay in a marriage for 27 years with someone that lies, is deceitful, manipulates money, has affairs, just as secretive, I don't know, how could I stay in that so long? And I can't kick myself because I really wanted to believe good in everyone. I wanted to, make excuses, and I wanted to say, well, it will get better. Or then when there's children involved, you don't want to jeopardize their safety and security. There's a lot of reasons why people stay in situations, but I believe that for someone who is really in a low point and trying to figure it out, first of all, kudos to you that you're even at that point where you're thinking, okay, I need to maybe do something here. Follow your gut feeling, learn about red flags in relationships with people at work or in your family or your social circle, and do that inner reflection work to find out, okay, why am I an overgiver? Why am I a people pleaser? Why don't I have strong boundaries to allow some of the things that have happened? And then you get to a phase where you want to sort of make some changes. And now there's a big difference between alienation and estrangement too. So estrangement, like let's say that you're choosing not to have a relationship with someone in your family or someone in your circle. That's different. Alienation is where someone else is poisoning the mind of someone else, brainwashing them with lies, with a false narrative. Estrangement is more thoughtful, actually, because you're choosing to step back from a situation because it's not healthy.
Mm-hmm. But if I may just add on to that too, because I know you talked about looking inside of yourself, following your gut feeling, things like that. From someone who, myself in this case, who has constant anxiety, who's been through those relationships that are no good, it kind of builds this wall and this kind of fear that it's going to happen again, and you kind of distance yourself or allow yourself to see things that maybe aren't really there. I think there has to be a significant amount of logic and reason that ties into the gut feeling. And that could be something that maybe you can do on your own. But I think you also have to consider talking to someone really close to you who's a true friend or a family member to try to get their viewpoint and understand what's really happening. Because in some cases, what you might see is maybe, or what your gut feeling might be telling you, might just be anxiety or something else that's your own personal thing you have to work through.
Right. And anxiety does play, and it's a very common response to after you've been burned in some relationships, to tread lightly and just don't want to jump into these. And that's not a bad thing. You're better off being alone than being in a relationship that is unhealthy, where your values aren't aligning and that type of thing. And so I think the anxiety, pay attention to that. And yes, I can see how, you might want to run it by someone else to see if you are really seeing the picture without projecting your own stress or your own history onto, a new situation. It's very hard to be open. Like I found love again, but I wasn't looking for it at all. And didn't even really want it, after what I had gone through. And I think give yourself permission that there's no timeline here for you to have to be in a relationship or to, become more social or something. Understand that the anxiety is real, and there's sometimes you do need to work through that, but sometimes that anxiety is a good thing, that it's kind of keeping you from getting in a situation that could be a repeat. Because a lot of people do, especially with narcissists, and there's, that's a term that's thrown around a lot today, but, it's there are covert narcissists, vulnerable narcissists, even people that are spiritual narcissists. So they rope you in because, you just assume because they are connected with spirituality, or they are believers, or they're at a church or something, that they have good intentions, when really that might not be the case. So go easy on yourself, or just anyone in this situation. There's no hurry to get into any relationships, and it's okay to take time. And I would say really the best way to get through some of this is actually pursue the passions that you have. Start connecting more with yourself and what you like to do. And then you'd be amazed. There might be some other people that like some of those same things too. And you would have a common bond there. That is a natural common bond. It's not a forced bond. And I'm a big believer that actions and many times speak louder than words. So people can tell you all sorts of things. But people can lie. and even if you are seeking out support from someone, be careful that not to rely so much on others, and get back to relying a little bit more on just yourself. And there are many different ways to get validation or get suggestions, and see how other people have gone through it. There's so many books out there. There's many different podcasts out there. You don't want to, you've got to be careful too with friends, that you don't burden them with the same issues that you are going over and over and over and over in your head, and you need to go over and over and over, but that might be a lot for another person to take on. So find a balance there. But the anxiety, the way you described it, is negative, but I think in some ways anxiety can be good, because it's kind of like making you think twice about some things, and that's okay. There's no hurry. You don't have to answer to anyone. We need to get more connected with ourselves, and I think that is where God comes in, and where spirituality comes in, where you really realize you have a lot within you, within your own heart and soul. And then if you can throw some research into it and kind of take some time to investigate it, and take some time in quiet. We don't meditate or pray or just spend time alone as much as we should. And that's something these 3.5 years I've been able to do a lot. Swimming in the ocean, hiking the rainforest, just watching the sunsets, just really kind of slowing down.
Mm-hmm.
But I also am in a different phase of my life. I'm retired. I was a high school teacher for 35 years. So I did wake up to an alarm every day, and I was very busy tutoring and teaching college, and, doing all sorts of things. So I am in a different phase in my life. So I know it's a luxury that I have that time.
Mm. All right, Marni. Well, it's about that time where we usually let our guests go, so I want to give you the chance to tell everybody where they can find your books, find you. The mic's all yours.
Sure. Well, and thank you so much for having me on your podcast and just having this very thoughtful conversation. I mean, I don't know that we had answers, but we sure got to talk about things, which is great. All my books can be found on Amazon. That's the easiest place. Barnes and Noble. My publisher is Balboa Press, which is a division of Hay House. So there's a lot of spirituality and self-help kind of books there. But, I'm not on social media, but I have a website, which is the title of my spiritual fiction. So www.godcametomygarage-sale.com.
All right, Dr. Marni Hill Foderaro, thank you so much for being on ParaTruth Radio.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me here.
All right, folks, that was Dr. Marni Hill Foderaro. Make sure you check out her book and her website. All that's going to be linked on our website, paratruth.com.
What do you think?
It's kind of hard to follow that entire conversation. I think we've both been through similar things in our lives that brought her to the understanding that she had or has now. But
not hard. I know you said hard to follow, but it probably meant hard to follow up after that conversation.
Well, yeah, to follow that entire interview, like to do the post show, it's hard to talk about. I mean,
really, we could just cut it right here.
She gave us a lot of food for thought. A lot of people want to believe that they're stuck in the situation that they're in. But it took her having these STE experiences, it sounds like, to really understand there's way more to the picture than what her original thinking was. And a lot of people do think that, and she is actually the first in a while that I had heard somebody say, you know, they were raised atheist. Not that there aren't those families out there that don't believe in organized religion or that there is an afterlife and stuff, but she's definitely the first guest I've talked to in a while that openly admitted she was brought up in a non-religious family or spiritual family, and did a complete 180, and now is a believer. Maybe not a firm believer, but she's a believer.
Yeah, I mean, I use the word firm believer loosely because I've met people who are firm believers, but then you see when things get tough at times, and it's everyone goes through the hurt. But yeah, I think the hardest part about everything that was discussed, all the stuff that you and I have discussed over the last several months, probably several years, because it feels like an ongoing thing now. I think it's sometimes hard to follow certain advice when you're not seeing the other side yet, because the best we can do, like in this case, is see how somebody else's story is playing out, when we have these discussions. But your own story is in a particular place and you don't know what the end is yet. You don't know whether it's going to get better or worse. And for many people, I think they do see the negative side of it, which is difficult. Because like I said, the bad does speak louder than the good, which is unfortunate, but it's something that has been happening since the dawn of humanity,
Right.
And you see it in the textbooks, all the history books, not just religious texts, just all history books. There's just bad after bad after bad. I mean, look at the news networks, right? The whole reason I haven't, my father's been trying to get me to apply for work at the local news stations, because I have the degree in film. I refuse to, because I don't want to be part of that agenda, which constantly plays all the negative stories over and over. It's all about the murders and the rapes and the animal abuse and this and that. And I'm like, I don't want to be a part of that.
Well, a friend of ours, Justin Fall, talked about how he had went to school specifically for being on radio and TV. And I think it was radio specifically. And he was told, okay, you can't say these things. You can't talk about these specific things. This is what you're going to be doing. And he walked away from all of that because he didn't believe that was the right thing to do.
Well, and I have a friend, my friend Lewis, he works for the news and he doesn't enjoy it. Now he hasn't gone too deep into what it is, but I understand that it's a difficult situation. It's time consuming. It's, I don't know. I can't speak for everybody, but from what I gather, based on reviews that I've read, comments that people have made who've worked in the news networks, especially in the production side of stuff, it's just a very negative atmosphere, so I just know that's something that I don't want to do. And it's like trying to put that wall up against as much negativity as possible. And yet it still creeps its way in,
Right. Well, and I think that's where you're going to benefit is yes, it would be a full-time income for you to be working for a news company or any type of TV company. But you're sticking to your values and what you believe, compared to those that, I hate to say it this way, sell out and go into the news or any other broadcast, and there are plenty that get lost in that too and just start believing what they're fed because it's their job.
Right.
All right, folks, I hope you enjoyed this episode where we talk to Dr. Marni Foderaro. Make sure you are sharing, and subscribing no matter where you listen. And stay tuned to all the great things going on with ParaTruth Reborn. Again, this was a pre-recorded show on 107.7 FM New Orleans, 105.3 FM on the Gulf Coast, and United Public Radio Network. Until next week, where you'll find us same time, same channel. My name is Justin. Talk to you guys later.